Your Excellencies, Honorable Prime Ministers, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be addressing you today on the occasion of the European Union's Digital Summit. I'm actually especially pleased that we're doing this in Estonia, one of the most rapidly digitizing countries in the world, and one that is showing the way in terms of what digitization can do for its economy and society. I'm going to focus my remarks in 4 key areas. The first one is the digital opportunity that is here today. Second, the rapidly emerging opportunity from artificial intelligence and automation. Third, I'm going to discuss the implications for the future of work. And then finally, and fourth, I'm going to discuss what I see as imperatives for Europe, and maybe some suggestions for you to consider. Let me start with the digital opportunity that's already here. Digitization is everywhere, from smartphones, the mobile internet, and e-commerce, to cloud-based services. Moreover, big data, advanced analytics, Industry 4.0 are transforming business and industrial processes and value chains everywhere. And digitally enabled business models are reshaping sectors such as retail, hospitality, transportation, finance, and will transform many more. Digitization is also transforming globalization. Traditional flows may have plateaued in the last few years, but digital globalization continues to accelerate. Cross-border data flows were already significant in 2005. But since 2005, cross-border data flows have grown 45 times larger and are projected to increase by an additional 9+ times over the next 5 years. Europe is a big part of this story. It has the lion's share of the world's cross-border data flows. Data flows don't just transmit valuable streams of information and ideas, they also enable movement and reach of goods, services, finance, and people. And in some cases, have become goods and services themselves. Digital globalization is enabling small and medium-sized businesses to export at far higher rates and reach customers and suppliers in ways that only large companies were able to do in the past. Yet, in the face of all these opportunities, we find that the digitization process itself is progressing unevenly across companies, sectors, and economies. Our assessment suggests that the degree of digitization varies across companies, including those in the same sector, and even across large established companies, as you can see in this sample of large companies. We find the same across sectors, as shown here looking at several sectors across several countries in Europe. What we find is that a few sectors are highly digitized, such as the financial services sector, media, and the tech industry itself, while the rest are much less so. The less digitized sectors tend to include many of the most basic manufacturing, public sector, quasi-public sector sectors such as healthcare and education, but also large and fragmented sectors such as hospitality and construction. These differences in the degree of digitization matter. Companies that are digital leaders tend to have faster revenue growth. They improve profit margins 3 times more rapidly than the average, and more often than not, are the fastest innovators and disruptors of their sectors, and in some cases, sectors beyond their own. The most digitized sectors tend to have high productivity growth, and up to 2 times the wage growth of other sectors. Sectors lagging in digitization tend to be the largest in terms of share of GDP and employment, and often have low productivity, a factor that may partly explain the sluggish productivity growth we see across economies, given the size of these less digitized sectors. And finally, at the country level, most countries have barely reached their digital potential. We estimate that Europe in aggregate has captured roughly 12% of its potential from digitization. The US is not doing much better at 18%. According to our estimates, Europe could gain an additional 2.5 trillion euros of GDP by 2025 through further digitization, and that would lift GDP 10% above the baseline projections for that year. Second, let me speak to the accelerating progress we're seeing in artificial intelligence. Over the last 5 or so years, we've seen amazing progress in automation, machine learning, and AI. We've seen machines that can read lips, MRI images, and so forth, all better than humans. We've also seen demonstrations of driverless trucks, this one on a beer run. And we've also seen DeepMind's AlphaGo win the ancient game of Go, where possibilities exceed the number of atoms in the universe. And there are many more practical and day-to-day applications and use cases, and increasingly, we're not even aware that they're there doing these magical, imaginative things. What is clear is that companies that adopt AI and automation will benefit. Some of the gains will come from labor substitution, but other gains will go beyond labor substitution to include discovery of novel solutions and performance possibilities that exceed human capabilities. For national economies, these technologies could give a much-needed boost to productivity, especially as most advanced economies in Europe and elsewhere are aging and have falling birth rates. AI could also help tackle some societal moonshots in areas ranging from climate science to curing diseases. It is no wonder that investment in AI is growing rapidly. Today, investment in AI is dominated by a handful of US and Chinese companies. Yes, European companies such as ABB, Bosch, BMW, Siemens, and others are also investing in AI, but overall, Europe is lagging behind both the United States and China. Now, let's come to the question that's probably on most people's minds, which are the implications of these technologies on work. And the question is, what does this mean for work and jobs? Working with others, we've looked at over 2,000 constituent activities that make up over 800 occupations and assessed the automatability of these activities using currently demonstrated technologies. What we find is that there are three classes of activities that have a significantly high potential to be automated. These are activities that involve data collection, data processing, and physical work that's done in highly structured and predictable environments, so think assembly lines. In the US, these highly automatable activities make up roughly half the activities carried out by workers today and account for roughly 2.7 trillion in wages. These highly automated activities are present in all economies. For Europe's 5 largest economies, we estimate that about 1.9 trillion in wages and about 60 million workers are associated in some form or fashion with these highly automatable activities. These highly automated activities are more prevalent in some occupations and in some sectors more than others. For example, in sectors like manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, retail, trade, these tend to be sectors that have a relatively high density of these activities. Now, to be clear, to say that half the activities have the potential to be automatable is not to say that half the jobs will disappear. Let me explain. We find that roughly 5% of occupations consist of nearly 100% of their activities that can be automated using currently demonstrated technologies. But about 60% of occupations have about 30% of their activities that could be automated. This means that more jobs will change than will disappear, and more people will work alongside rapidly evolving machines and likely require rapidly evolving skills in order to adapt to this new world. And as we consider this, it is important to keep in mind that the rate and extent of automation will depend on several factors. The first of these is the technical feasibility of actually automating these activities. And this, of course, depends on the rate and pace of technological breakthroughs, and there are still many more challenges and difficulties that still have to be overcome. But this is not the only factor. The second factor is the cost of deploying these automation technologies and the time and cost of replacing old ones. A third important consideration are the labor market dynamics themselves, and this is to do with the quality, supply, and the wages associated with the human labor that's currently doing these activities. And fourth are the benefits beyond labor substitution itself. These could include benefits such as safety in hazardous settings and environments, and/or compelling capabilities that go beyond what humans can do. And of course, there are going to be regulatory and social factors, such as social acceptance, which will vary by activity and setting. Now, one clear way to mitigate the effects of automation on work is to ensure economic growth that also generates labor demand. Such growth in turn also depends on productivity growth, which in turn benefits from automation. But even with robust economic growth and demand for work, complex worker transitions will be unavoidable. The sectors and occupations where new jobs are created may not be the same as where the old ones are lost. Different skills and capabilities will be required to thrive in this shifting environment of new and evolving occupations and activities alongside machines. Wages will likely come under pressure for some categories of workers, especially those with skills not well adapted to the new environment. This, of course, brings me to my final point, which is what could be Europe's imperatives faced with these opportunities as well as challenges. I see two categories of imperatives: those to do with capturing the digital opportunity and those to do with preparing for the future of work. Let me start with capturing the digital opportunity. The first imperative that I see is that governments are going to have to lead by example. That means setting ambitious digitization goals for your own public sectors to improve efficiency and effective delivery of citizen services. As part of this, policymakers must embrace digital opportunity and make the case more clearly that digital technologies will be a force for greater prosperity and evolve their policies and approaches, even as they maintain and as you maintain a high level of data protection, digital rights, and cybersecurity. Second, it's going to be very important to complete the single digital market. The Commission has been making progress, for example, with recent efforts to frame a model for talent, mobility, and data flows, but more can and must be done. For example, common legal and regulatory frameworks could enable digital companies to scale within and beyond individual countries. Third, embrace and enable the growth of digital platforms and digital innovators. Digital platforms are powerful tools. They give small and medium-sized businesses reach, they facilitate job matching, and in many ways, they're the real engine of the digital age. But at the same time, their winner-take-all dynamics require monitoring and regulatory frameworks evolved for the digital age. Fourth, invest in digital infrastructure, digital skills, and digital ecosystems. Europe's future as a thriving economy will depend on its ability to step up investments in these areas. As part of this, Europe must continue to attract digital foreign direct investment that complements and enables homegrown digital innovation and talent to thrive. Fifth, experiment more boldly with AI and other new technologies. Europe already has many AI and next-generation technology startups. You can see this in the emerging ecosystems in Amsterdam, London, Barcelona, Stockholm, for example. But there's an untapped scope to support the development of these technologies in terms of incentives and access to capital and markets. Now, in terms of preparing for the future of work, let me also suggest 5 imperatives. First, to ensure strong employment, you're going to need strong growth. Sustaining aggregate demand and restoring investment in Europe will be critical to ensure labor demand at this time of automation. Growth will also create the surpluses needed to tackle some of the worker transitions and training and challenges that I described earlier. Second, along with a stronger economy, you need entrepreneurs in a dynamic business scene where companies large and small can invest and create jobs. Third, education, training, and lifelong learning will be essential in the years ahead. This will especially be critical for mid-career, middle-skill workers who will need to transition to new occupations and also to different types of work alongside machines, requiring different kinds of skills. And these skills will not only include STEM skills, but also creativity and critical and systems thinking. So it's not just about coding. Fourth, at a time of such complex worker transitions, it will be more important than ever to improve our labor markets work and enable more diverse forms of work. Greater mobility and better matching of workers with opportunities needed across Europe to increase fluidity. But it is also important to build in worker protections, including the portability of benefits, amongst others. And fifth and finally, the time may have come to rethink and evolve worker supports. If automation, whether full or partial, does result in significant reduction in employment and/or greater pressure on wages for some segment of workers, Ideas such as conditional transfers, adapted social safety nets, different forms of taxation, or even universal basic income may be needed, must be considered, tested, and evaluated. And as I said at the outset, these are exciting times, but also challenging times. The technology is arriving very quickly and very fast, and the policies are going to need to follow without too much lag in order for Europe to reap the full benefits of our new digital age. Thank you for your attention.